In the case of India, in the case of Brazil, as well as in the case of the United States, there's great concern that these right-wing populists have come to power and they have quite strong bases of support and are pushing a style of politics and a set of policies that arguably are antithetical to the norms of democracy, and in particular to the norms of democratic inclusion. Having said that, it's important to remember that their powers are still limited, that they came to power democratically, and they still have to answer to democratic institutions and democratic constitutions. And despite all their efforts to instrumentalize or use or corrupt those institutions in some cases are very, very robust. In the US, they're particularly robust because it's an older democracy. It's also a very federal democracy, and there are many parts of the country that just are not on board with Trump's agenda. In Brazil, I think to some extent, the institutions are also quite strong, but what makes a big difference in Brazil is just the historical strength of civil society. It's a very sophisticated, very well-organized civil society with a lot of horizontal connections. So I think there's a lot of capacity within civil society to resist some of the efforts by Bolsonaro to undermine democratic institutions. It's also not clear to me that Bolsonaro has a real base, that the circumstances under which he won the elections were quite unusual. There'd been a collapse of some of the centrist political parties in Brazil. But his style of populism, while it may produce a lot of fervent support among certain groups, it's not really clear he can build a sustainable coalition. So in that respect, there's some room for optimism that this will be a relatively short-run experiment with authoritarianism. India is a far greater concern simply because Narendra Modi and the BJP, unlike Bolsonaro and his recently created political party, the BJP is highly organized, it's highly programmatic, it's deeply ideological. They have a vision, they have a project, they're determined, they have millions of cadres on the ground to push forward their effort. And the electoral victory of the BJP in this past election was really overwhelming. So they do have a massive electoral mandate. So there's a lot of concern there. But it's also the case, not as much so as in Brazil, that there's a pretty ingenious and resilient civil society in India. So it's too early to judge, really. There's great room for concern given the recent actions of the BJP and, among other things, annexing the entire state of Kashmir, the only Muslim majority state in India. But it's a big, huge, diverse, and unwieldy country. And so one has to hope that even a determined authoritarian regime is going to find it very difficult to impose its mandate.